I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. John, can you read our statement, please?
Certainly. Pursuant to the declared state of emergency in the Commonwealth of Virginia in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and to protect the public health and safety of the Transportation Programming Subcommittee members, staff, and the general public, today's meeting is being held electronically. This electronic meeting is required to complete essential business on behalf of the region. Per the requirements of the Code of Virginia, the agenda and all supporting documentation were posted on the HRTPO website for public review, and electronic copies of this information were provided to TPS members and other interested parties. Today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The live stream is available for viewing on the Regional Connection YouTube channel, and the recording will be available via the HRTPO website. The general public was provided an opportunity to comment on today's agenda in advance of the meeting via two options. Members of the public were invited to email comments to the TPS, and members of the public were invited to call into a dedicated phone line where comments could be recorded for the TPS. No comments were received via either option as of 48 hours before the meeting. Before we begin today's remote meeting, I need to remind members of a few important housekeeping rules. First of all, everyone is asked to keep their phones and computers muted except for when you're providing input. Please identify yourself by name and the locality or agency you represent when you provide input. Do the same should you provide a motion or a second. All votes taken today must be made by roll call vote and recorded in the minutes. Thanks for your cooperation and patience. Attendance will now be recorded by roll call. And just a quick reminder about voting. In order to vote, TPS members must be voting members of the TTAC. For attendance and voting purposes, if your name is not called during the roll call and you're a member of TTAC, please let us know. We'd like to make sure that each locality and agency is correctly represented in the voting record and make sure that the minutes are accurately reflected. Thank you.
This is Kathleen. Can everybody see the roll call?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Troy Eisenberger.
Present.
Earl Sorey.
Present.
Carol Rizzio.
Present.
Yeah, no video. I'm not talking, but maybe use this.
Andy G. Ortiz. Lynn Keenan.
Present.
Jamie Oliver. Paul Holt.
Here.
Lisa Simpson.
Present.
Brian Stilley.
Present.
Robert Brown.
Present.
Carl Jackson.
Present.
James Wright. Beth Lewis. Michael Johnson. Robert Lewis.
Present.
LJ Hansen. Phil Poulin. Katie Shannon.
Present.
Carolyn Murphy.
Present.
Tim Cross.
Here.
Keisha Branch. Barb Creel. I do see Barb. Josh Moore. Tiffany Dubinsky. Todd Hallisey.
Present.
Sonia Holmans-Ponton. Eric Stringfield.
Good morning.
Good morning. Barb Nelson.
Good morning. Present.
Kathleen, this is Debbie Mantrosina with the City of Norfolk. I'm a voting member of TTAC.
Thank you.
Kathleen, this is David Jarman with the City of Virginia Beach. I'm also a voting member at TTAC.
Is there anyone else? And Debbie, I'm going to put your last name in later when I can remember how to spell it.
Understood.
Okay, thank you very much. A quorum is just a majority of members, so we do have a quorum.
Fantastic. Thank you, ma'am. Kathleen, it's Sonia is Helen Ponton is also here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 3, approval of the agenda. If anyone have any changes, modifications they'd like to make to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I do have one slight modification to attachment number 8 in the agenda. The Nimmo Parkway Phase 7B project, the UPC number on that project has been updated, and it should be listed as 115543. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Any other modifications requested? All right, can I get a motion to approve the modified agenda?
Carolyn Murphy from City of Williamsburg. I motion to approve the modified agenda.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a motion. Can I get a second?
This is Katie Shannon.
All right, motion is second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, going for concurrence. Is anyone objects to the motion? Hearing none, thank you. On to the minutes of our last meeting. Taking everyone has had time to review them. Do we have any corrections or modifications requested? All right, hearing none, I get a motion to approve the minutes.
Jim Cross, York County. I move approval.
Thank you. Have a motion. Can I get a second?
Prasberg, City Chesapeake, second.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, for concurrence, is anyone objecting to the motion? Motion passes. On to item 5, Southeastern Public Service Authority flyover project update.
Good morning. This is Liesl DeVary with Sipsa.
Welcome.
And I have a PowerPoint presentation to provide.
Yeah, we'll pull that up right now. Thanks, Jeff.
Is it up?
Not yet.
Okay. I'm not sure.
Appreciate everyone's patience as we work through a little technical glitch.
There we go.
All right.
Well, good morning. Like I said, my name is Liesl DeVary. I'm the Executive Director for Sipsa. And I just want to thank you in advance for giving us the opportunity to make this presentation to you, to provide you and give you some additional considerations when reviewing our request for funding for flyover over at the regional landfill. And then is somebody going to? Okay, great. So first, I thought I'd give you a little bit of background. Sipsa was created in the early 70s, and we are a public body incorporated in the state of Virginia. Our purpose is defined in the Code of Virginia for the management of the safe and environmentally sound disposal of regional waste. As you probably know, our members are the cities of Chesapeake, Franklin, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Suffolk, Virginia Beach, and the counties of Isle of Wight and Southampton. We are governed by a 16-member board of directors, of which 8 members are appointed by the governor and 8 members are employees of each of our localities. And just to summarize, we operate and manage the regional landfill, which is located in Suffolk. We have 9 transfer stations, a transportation division. We have 2 fleet maintenance shops, a tire processing facility out at the landfill, and we have a household hazardous waste collection program. And then the next slide just gives you an overview or picture of our service area. It's all of basically southeastern Virginia. We cover approximately 2,000 square miles and about 1.2 million residents. And you can see right there in the middle of the page, that is where our regional landfill is. And we do consider it to be centrally located when you look at all of the different areas where we have our transfer stations and where we collect waste from. On the next slide, I just wanted to give you an idea of how the waste flows through our region. So starting over at the far left, we have our members. They pick up the waste at all the residents, and then they deliver it to our transfer stations. We also have private haulers, what we consider as commercial waste, that deliver to our transfer stations as well. And we have about 610,000 tons that come through our transfer stations each year. From there, Sipsa transports about 15% of that waste, and it goes to the regional landfill. Then the other 85% of the waste is hauled by Sipsa as well as a third-party contractor, MBI, and it goes to the Wheelabrator Waste-to-Energy facility that's located in Portsmouth. And then the city of Portsmouth and some of our other member communities also would deliver waste directly to Wheelabrator. So the reason I really want to point this out is there are changes coming to the Wheelabrator Waste-to-Energy facility. And since that's where the majority of our waste goes, this is a significant piece. So the next slide. We have a contract with Wheelabrator, and for those of you who may not know, the Wheelabrator Portsmouth plant takes the waste and they burn it, which ends up generating steam. And then the steam is sold to the Norfolk Naval Shipyard to fuel its facilities. Any excess steam that they generate is sold as energy to the grid. We found out this time last year that the Navy plans to build its own natural gas power plant, which will eliminate the need for steam for Wheelabrator. Right now, the Wheelabrator and the Navy, their contract actually expires in January of 2023. However, the contract that Sipsa has with Wheelabrator doesn't expire until June 2027. We started talks. A regional stakeholders group came together early last year, and we had talks with the Navy, and the Navy is entertaining an extension for possibly 18 months, which would take then the Wheelabrator contract for steam would end in June of 2024. What's so significant about this is Wheelabrator has already informed us that they are going to lose approximately $10 million in annual revenue without the steam contract, and they will not be able to sustain operations with that loss. So we're still kind of waiting. We don't have any firm decision yet. So we're waiting to hear what's going to happen. But one of our, since we make plans for the long term, we've got to consider now what happens if that wheelabrator contract goes away and 85% of that waste, we then would need to direct it to the regional landfill. So if all that waste now needs to go to the regional landfill, this is going to result in increased traffic out at the landfill, as well as accelerating the need to expand our landfill. The next slide. This gives you, this is our master plan out at the regional landfill. It's located off of Route 58. In the very middle, the deep blue, that is what we refer to as cells 1 through 4. And they are filled and that cell is closed. Down below it, the gray is existing cells 5 and 6. And that is what we are currently operating in. That is where all the waste that we take out there currently goes. And then to the right of that is an orange cell, and this is our cell 7. This is the next cell that we would be expanding into. It is fully permitted by DEQ, and we have a conditional use permit with Suffolk, and I'll go into that in a minute. But as you can see, there's plenty more acreage out there for future expansion, when needed. Okay, the next slide, please. So our cell 7 really has been in the planning stages since the early 90s. It takes a long time to actually permit a cell, and back then they were certainly planning way ahead. And even though we got our DEQ permit with cell 7, we have been able to defer construction on it because in 2010, that is when we sold the power plant to Wheelabrator, whereby eliminating the need to take all the region's waste there. So cell 7 has been in the planning stages, and but we haven't had the need to use it yet. Our conditional use permit with the city of Suffolk, it was issued in 2017, and it requires a new grade separated entrance into the landfill before any waste could be placed in cell 7. So a flyover for the traffic coming from the west would meet this requirement. In 2014, just to give you a little bit of history, and some of you might recall, Sipsa went through a difficult time. Back in 2009, the tipping fee was $170 a ton. Sipsa had a lot of debt, and all of the use and support agreements with the member communities were set to expire in January of 2018. So in around 2014, a big group of all of our member communities got together to start talking about the future of Sipsa and what was going to be done. From 2010 to 2014, Sipsa showed a tremendous improvement in their operations and their finances, and I think that provided some confidence with the member communities that after our restructuring, we could continue successfully. So this flyover was conceptualized and planned back then in 2014 so that the regional landfill could continue to be expanded. The group kind of made that decision, all of the CAOs in the region at the time, and it was planned to be funded with regional transportation dollars, which came to be, was planned for HR TAC funds. But as you know, the HR TAC mission changed and really needed to, the funds should only be used to address congestion issues. So that's where we are and have been working on this and thinking about it since 2016, 2017. Last year, we received an estimate for the cost of this flyover to be approximately $24 million. We applied for the build grant. We were not successful, and now we are applying for RSTP funds. The current estimates we received last week is that the flyover will cost $40 million. So this really makes RSTP funds even more important for us now. And I do want to point out that we have set aside $5 million towards this project. So the next slide, I wanted to give you a visual of how the entrance is currently. So coming down 58, and if you're coming from the east, you make a left turn in the median, and then you go straight across to Bob Fuller, and that's the actual entrance into the landfill currently. So you can just imagine, we have some of our own Sipsa trucks and also Suffolk trash trucks that sit there at that median for 30 minutes waiting for a safe time to pass. And there are a considerable amount of people that use this to make a U-turn onto 58. The next slide. And this provides you a conceptual view of what the plan is. So coming from the west, there would be a right lane that would take you up and over, flyover to go over all 6 lanes of 58, and then it brings you back down onto 58 to the current turn lane there, as they will expand it. But this would provide for safe entry into the landfill as well as safe for making U-turns there. So this median at the landfill would be closed, and this would resolve all safety concerns. The next slide. So if we don't build this flyover, there are consequences. So if we do not build this flyover, this is going to equate to no further expansion of the regional landfill. And all of the region's waste will then have to be hauled to private facilities, which of course equates to sustained higher costs for waste disposal. One of the things that we will no longer have control over is what kind of, it's called a tip fee, that you pay to take your waste somewhere else. Commercial landfills, like the one at Bethel, there's one out at Atlantic, and one out at Waverly. Private industry wants to, when they build a landfill, they want to fill that landfill up as fast as possible so that they can get the return on their investment. As a regional landfill, that's not our intent, is to fill that landfill up. It is to be there to be like a backup almost. And also, always to make sure that we have somewhere to take the waste. So if we're not going to be able to expand the landfill, we will not have control over the price that we pay for tipping. We will need additional drivers, trucks, fuel. It's naturally going to increase our carbon footprint. And the other thing that's very important to us is going somewhere else means that we will no longer have any kind of environmental oversight in how they handle the waste. I mean, everybody is under, DEQ regulations, but, we believe at our landfill, we don't just meet those regulations, but we exceed how we treat things, especially environmentally out there. So next slide. So I think there are 3 main areas that we'd like you to consider. One is the regional importance of the project. The second is a safety issue, and the third is economic impacts. Next slide. So Sipsa provides a critical public service for local governments. Disposing of trash, taking care of all the member communities' trash, it is an essential service, just as water, sewer, fire, police. And there hasn't been one moment that Sipsa has stalled ever since this coronavirus began. Everybody has been at work every day. Naturally, we can't provide that from home. So this is a very critical public service. And I think a lot of people take trash for granted. Our regional landfill ensures that the Sipsa member localities will continue to have an environmentally safe, a cost-efficient, and reliable solution for their waste disposal needs. And the flyover provides a regional transportation solution, as well as it will enable us to expand the regional landfill. Next slide. There certainly are a tremendous amount of safety considerations you need to look at. US Route 58-460-13, which as we all know is a very high-speed corridor, and it carries over 80,000 vehicles each weekday. And as I pointed out, the intersection at the landfill not only includes the entrance to the landfill, but it also serves as the first point for someone to make a U-turn if they're coming from the west. This intersection is the site of many side impact collisions, including, and unfortunately, one death in 2019 of a Sipsa employee. They were making that turn to arrive at work and were hit by another tractor trailer. And also, as you well know, the traffic congestion and volume is going to only increase as the region expands. Next slide. Something that people might not come to mind right away, but there really are economic impacts with this. But solid waste plays a critical role in how you manage it in economic development. When people or potential businesses are looking to perhaps come here to the region, if they find out that they will be more interested in coming to the region if they know that waste is managed in an environmentally responsible manner as well as at a regional cost. If we have to, once again, we have to haul it away, not only is that more cost, but just think about more traffic on the roads. So without the Sipsa landfill and having that ability to expand, the region will be less likely to attract interest in economic development. So last but not least, we feel it is in the region's best interest to expand the regional landfill for its member communities, and it's in the region's best interest to solve transportation safety issues. And the proposed flyover meets both of these regional requirements. So that's what I have for you today. May I entertain any questions?
Questions from the floor?
Jamie with Isle of Wight. I was wondering, do we understand why the estimate went from 20 million to 40 million?
Understand, not yet, but I think VDOT's on here. Maybe they can provide an insight.
Yeah, Jamie, this is Chris Hall. So a couple of factors. I think the number one factor is some very liberal assumptions on the NEPA side, as well as on our general geotechnical assumptions. But I think the number one thing is we are early in the concept phase with this when we came up with these estimates dating back 2 to 3 years ago. The most recent ones, I think one of the issues too is trying to frame it within the constraints of the build grant. So all of those things coming together, got us in an area where we were making some assumptions that were probably not valid, but very comfortable with the estimate revised. We, as I've discussed with Liesl, we are committed to moving forward with some preliminary engineering work to continue to validate some of those assumptions regarding soil conditions, discussions with the Corps and other environmental agencies to validate some of our potential or assumed NEPA issues. So that's where we are with the estimate.
Follow-on question is probably for VDOT as much as anybody. Do you have a expected schedule for design and heading towards construction?
Yeah, Brian, we're right now we are our schedule is focused on delivery in 2026 in anticipation for the opening of the Cell 7 requirement. So, I mean, you know, right now we believe that we have a valid schedule to meet that. It's a design bid build option, which is the cheaper option right now. So that's part of the assumptions for the estimate as well. But 2026, early 2026 is our target for completion of the project.
This is Katie Shannon with Virginia Beach. Couple of follow-up questions to that. Have other alternatives been reviewed? And does the RSDP funding even line up with that schedule? Because the request was for, I believe, some seed money in FY27, but you're talking about completion in FY26 or 2026.
This is Liesl. That's a good question. Currently, our plan is, if everything stays as is with Wheelabrator and they're able to fulfill their contract, we would need to have Cell 7 until probably 27 or 28. Now, if the Wheelabrator contract or that ends sooner, we definitely are going to need to be going into, you know, start taking waste into Cell 7 around 2026. So it certainly pushes up our timeline. The alternatives that we have for us currently in the region is hauling to other facilities. Besides the waste to energy and our landfill, there isn't another solution for waste disposal. We would have to haul to other landfills, which is going to increase, you know, the current rate that municipals pay quite a bit.
How about less expensive alternatives than the flyover? Like still improving the area, but not a flyover. Has that been vetted properly?
I believe so, because that was with VDOT. We had a group, a large group of us, and I don't know if VDOT or the TPO could maybe speak to some of those alternatives that were addressed. Because of course the concern is closing that median and having an alternate left turn into the landfill entrance.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bob Crum, if I may.
Sir.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Bob Crum. I'm your executive director here with the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission and the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization. Ms. Shannon, I think that's a great question. I want to be able to respond to that. So with the help of a VDOT on-call consultant, Sipsa, the cities of Suffolk and the cities of Chesapeake participated in about a 8 to 12 month process to look at various options for how this issue could be addressed. Some options much more comprehensive and significant than this that cost more. Other options, you know, from signing to smart transportation approaches to slip ramps, etc. At the conclusion of that process, the Sipsa flyover that you're seeing was the one that received the most endorsement from the localities involved in the process, and in terms of constructability from VDOT to carry forward. So great question, but yes, a number of different variables and options were evaluated through that study. And Mr. Chairman, if I may provide a couple of additional comments, sir.
Please.
I do want to indicate that, you know, in terms of the part of my life involved with the Planning District Commission work, I've been able to be involved with discussions on a number of items related to this flyover. First, related to the Wheelabrator issue. With City of Portsmouth elected mayor leadership, city manager, with the city manager and mayor from the city of Suffolk and with the military representatives. So I think Liesl described it very well and very accurately. As Liesl and I sat in those meetings, while there was great concern about the Willebrator facility and about the military moving away from Willebrator, despite a lot of efforts, it does not appear that we can steer that in another direction. So that urgency created by the Willebrator facility that Liesl described is very significant and very real. The other thing that I just wanted to support with what Liesl said today is her comments about the importance of this facility to economic development in our region and frankly in terms of fiscal impact to our residents and businesses. I think you're all aware that if we're going to be able to create jobs and attract jobs, affordable and environmentally sound waste disposal is going to be critical. We very much appreciate that Liesl's been saving for a rainy day and has $5 million, but let's make no mistake, if they have to pay for this flyover with tipping fees, that's going to have a direct financial impact on all of our business and all of our residents. So I did want to convey to this TPS group that from our regional planning perspective, this is a very, very important facility transportation upgrade to be able to allow us to move into the next phase of this regional landfill. The other thing I wanted to mention, Mr. Chairman, just to conclude my comments is this, and I think it was Jamie from Isle White, if I'm not mistaken, who brought up, Ms. Little brought up a great point, or was it Ms. Shannon that said, you know, you're asking for money in 2027 if you have to have this built by 2026. Couple things I just want to stress. We recognize you have limited dollars and do not envy the choices you're about to make. What we would ask for consideration is if there's some way to move this into the RSTP 6-year improvement program and maybe get a little bit of money on it up front. It gives us flexibility moving forward should there be other projects that either are closed out with cost savings or maybe other projects that are delayed that you've already allocated money to, that maybe that gives us some flexibility. So, Mr. Chairman, TPS members, we just ask for your consideration of trying to work this flyover into your RSTP 6-year program. But sir, thank you for the chance to make those comments in support of Liesl's presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We have any other questions, comments from the floor?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Chris Hall from VDOT. Yeah, just again, I would like to also emphasize the importance of this project from a regional perspective, and I will talk to the safety piece. Liesl hit on a few of those points at the end of her presentation, but as many of you may or may not know, the district did come Route 1358-460 corridor safety study, which was part of the information that went into the concept development process for this project. Taking a look at the crash histories from 2015 to 2019, it is one of the worst areas in the region in terms of safety related issues. Just to give you a little bit of a flavor, this corridor has one of the highest fatal crash rates in the region and probably within the state. I haven't looked at the state average numbers, but certainly it's in the top 5 within the region. 75% of it's above 75% fatal crash rate on average across the region compared to the interstate, about 30% as compared with other regional primary systems. So this reach of that 6-lane profile there on the 1358-460 area is a dangerous road, and only to get more dangerous as we as we proceed with more traffic going in and out of the landfill. Just want to highlight that. As Liesl mentioned, we did have a fatality out there a year and a half or 2 years ago. I can't remember when, but again, this continues to be an issue and a priority for us just from a safety perspective. We continue to look at other options along that corridor, not just with the entrance to the landfill, but all along that corridor in terms of safety improvement. So from our perspective, within regarding safety, this corridor is a priority, and this project certainly will be a tremendous enhancement to relieving a lot of those current safety issues, but also foreseeable safety and crash-related issues based on what we know to be will be increased truck traffic in and out of the landfill. So that's one of the things that I just wanted to emphasize in support of the project, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, sir. Other questions, comments?
This is Katie Shannon again from Virginia Beach. Just one last comment. I know Liesl mentioned that a build application was submitted and was unsuccessful. Did you also put in for a Smart Scale Round 4 application?
No, we did not. We discussed that, with that regional stakeholders group that Bob Crum mentioned, and we didn't. I believe they said that the criteria for that we didn't necessarily meet that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to respond. Another great question. So first off, the federal build application was denied, was not successful. For Smart Scale, of course, the heaviest weight of criteria for our Smart Scale applications in our region is congestion relief. And we couldn't get the congestion relief benefit out of this project. This project really rates among the safety, addressing safety issues, addressing economic development issues, and environmental issues. Unfortunately, those weights are quite low for smart scale applications in our region. So in collaboration with VDOT, they basically told us, look, you're not going to be competitive under smart scale, unfortunately. So, Katie, that's a great point. And I think part of the frustration with this one is trying to find the right fit for such an important project. Unfortunately, those two areas, we've knocked on those doors already.
We'll go on the assumption that the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which we haven't heard a call for applications in some time, that's not on the horizon either.
Mr. Chairman, I'll speak to that. We're continuing to look at the HSIP program as potentially, contributing to part of this solution. We don't have an answer for that yet. I know Todd is on the line, Todd Hall, and I don't think he's got anything to add to that.
Mr. Chair, this is Todd Hallisey. We are exploring other funding options, including safety funding. Right now, the safety program looks at more systemic type of improvements, which are lower cost type projects. So it may be challenging for this project, but we are exploring different options and seeing what we can do to apply funding.
Thank you, Todd. It's always a challenge to find the right pot that fits the project, and you can get enough buy-in from the granting agency. Any other questions, comments from the floor? All right, well, thanks for a good presentation, good conversation. Let's move on to item number 6. Request for 2027 RSTP funding from James City for UPC 102980. Mr. Holt, do you speak about this?
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
You're a little faint.
Yeah, a little hard to hear you, Paul.
All right, I'll try that. So this is just a little bit of an update on one of our existing projects. Our UPC 102980, our Pocahontas Trail Reconstruction and Multimodal Project, This is one that's been in the queue for many, many years. As I look back through the documentation, we actually started PE on this back in 2014. And we might already be up on our 10-year federal highways rule, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Challenge has always been we've never been able to get this fully funded. This point last year when we were going through this process, I thought I was going to be closer to about 2 million to try to get this fully funded. So that's what's showing up in fiscal year 27 as it pertains to the penciled in amount from last year. Part of the challenge I had a couple of months ago, about 3 months ago, as you all may recall, I had an unexpected cost estimate increase on one of my other projects, and the only way to keep that project fully funded and on schedule to move into the right-of-way phase was to move some money off of this Pocahontas Trail project to try to keep that thing going. I was just sort of out of options. There wasn't enough money in the reserve pot, and I worked with several of you, just weren't able to figure a way to shift and move money around otherwise. So long story short, in order to keep this project fully funded and on schedule, the penciled in amount I'd like to amend to 9.1 million. That keeps on schedule right now. Construction is proposed to begin in fiscal year 26. So over a 2-year expected construction window. This is going to keep this on schedule. And most importantly, for us being able to begin the right-of-way phase, I've got to be able to show that this project is fully funded in the fiscal year 27 6-year improvement plan. Trying to think what else might be helpful here. Oh, I put into the request, as you may have seen, sort of the perennial fill question. The county is expecting to put in 6 million of our own funding into utility betterment. So that represents our skin in the game. And I hope you all will look favorably upon request. So with the previous conversation, notwithstanding, the good news is this project is eligible for both RSTP and CMAQ funding. And if I'm remembering the spreadsheet from a couple months ago, I think we have a lot more availability of CMAQ funding than we do RSTP. So, with that, if you can just kind of keep that in mind as we get into opening up the tables and starting to balance out the amounts, I'd appreciate it. Take any questions.
Questions, comments from the floor?
Paul, this is Katie Shannon with Virginia Beach. Could you talk a little bit about the increase in cost? Because it looks like it's a two-part. It's 3 million for a cost increase and 3 million from the transfer.
No, so that's what I had to transfer off of the project back in October. All of that is finished up, and TPO board adopted that back in October. That's what I had to move off of the project. The cost estimate never changed. It's still at just over 30 million.
I'm sorry, I thought the request said that there was a cost increase as well.
No, that's what drove, there was a cost increase on a different project, which is what caused me to have to transfer some of the balance on this project onto that other project. So that's part of what's driving the change in the penciled in amount upwards to the 9 million figure.
And when you, back in October, when you did the transfer, was the plan always to go back to RSTP in FY27 for Pocahontas Trail?
Yeah, I was going to have to do that anyway because the project wasn't fully funded. I was hoping that it was going to be closer to 2 million, but like I said, the cost estimate never changed, but the delta now to keep this project fully funded is the 9.1.
Paul, is it safe to say that without the additional funds, you wouldn't be able to move the project forward?
You broke up a little bit there, Brian. Say that again.
If you don't receive the additional funds, a way forward for the project, or is it stalled?
It would be stalled because I wouldn't be able to show full funding in the 6-year plan.
Question for John. What's the capacity for reserve or for CMAC funds as opposed to the RSP requested or in the recommended action?
Yeah, we'll get to that in agenda item number 8.
Do you want me to pull up the current pencil in, John? For both?
Yeah, if you'd like, that'd be great. Thanks, Ed. And somebody, I believe, needs to mute because we have a lot of echo going on here. So everybody check your phones and computers, please. All right, go ahead, Jeff, if you don't mind pulling that up.
That's on. Okay, too.
So right now we have, we'll get into this a little bit later, but right now we have right about 15, upper 14 million available for CMAC. And our ask for fiscal year 27 is just about that total if we were to fund fiscal year 27 for all 24 projects that were submitted. So yes, there is capacity there. And it really boils down to the TPS members here, how they want to approach that. But there is some capacity there. And once we get to that item, we can certainly discuss that.
But
I don't know what's up, John, but I'm just getting.
I don't see anything, Jeff. I'll just go off the top of my head.
No, it's just circling on me. It's not loading, so I'm not sure why I'm in a loop right now.
Yeah. But if you look in your agenda, it's in your attachment. The 3. I just saw the table flash in there a second. But if you look in your agenda, if you have it printed out or on your screen, it's in the CMAC table. I think it's table 2, if I'm not mistaken. So you can see that there where the total amount of the previously approved projects right now is about 895,000, and the total ask for the new candidate projects is 14.6 million, and the total available for CMAC for 27 is 14.4 million. So we're right around that number already.
I guess more of my point is that there's capacity, but only if other projects are removed from the schedule.
There we go. All right. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. What was the question?
What I was inquiring about is there's capacity to add into the CMAC program, but only at the removal of some other projects to accommodate.
That's a possibility, yes.
This is Jamie from Isle of Wight. I guess we're going to talk about this a little bit more next time, but are all the projects in 2026 new projects, or are they penciled in projects? Because I thought we kind of had this perspective that we wanted to finish stuff we started first.
That's correct, Jamie. So the previously approved projects are typically funded first. That's been our precedent for many years. Then we take a look at the new candidate projects, both for CMAC and RSTP. But we always discuss the penciled in request first because it's our mission to fully fund projects until completion is one of our first steps. And I'll get into those funding guidelines we have on our CMAC and RSTP project selection guide, once again, in agenda item number 8.
So if you look at the screen now, what's shown here are what are penciled in carrying from last year, the 26 process for 27 funding. There are 4 CMAC projects with pencil in funding requests that just under 900,000 shown here. leaving a potential balance of about 14.5 million if those penciled in are allocated for 27 as they were penciled in. On the RSTP side, you have the 7 projects which currently have penciled in amounts
About 27 million.
0.4 million, which leaves about 9.6. And you see the James City County Pocahontas Trail at the 2.38 was the penciled in amount carrying. So underneath is the additional ask of about 6.75 million, which would lower the available RSTP balance for 27 if all these penciled in plus the additional ask were funded. You see the Pocahontas, though, in green, which means it's dual eligible in CMAQ and RSTP. So as Paul was saying, if some or all of this additional ask wanted to be funded in the CMAQ side, then there's greater room to accommodate it, but that would also then limit the amount available for new applications in 27.
I know that we've all, sorry, if this is Katie Shannon with Virginia Beach, and I know that we give precedent to existing projects, which I full-heartedly believe in, but typically if we transfer funding off of one project to another within the locality, it's when the project is either complete or a new funding stream has been identified, where that did not happen in this case. And I do have some concern that it kind of sets a precedent that if you have some you don't have the funding available, you can transfer it off of another project and then kind of go back, a few months later to the well and ask for that additional funding back.
So you're correct, Katie, in what you've mentioned here about funding cost overruns. We don't specifically address. Yeah, I think someone's not muted again. I'm sorry. Okay. So anyway, I'll address that as well in the presentation under agenda item number 8. But we don't specifically address that in our CMAQ RCP guide. Now, we are going to update our guide prior to the fiscal year or the 2021 process. If that's something that the group would like to discuss, I'll be talking about that a little bit later as well. But nothing at this point prohibits that.
But just to clarify, based on the chart that was sent out, there is room in the existing RSTP pot to fund the increase and to fund the other penciled in projects without removing anything.
That's correct. What we're doing is asking, or what James City County is asking, is to increase their ask for the fiscal year 27 monies for the Pocahontas Trail project. And then we typically address that prior to awarding any allocations or selecting projects that are new candidate projects.
All right, just a clarification for me. If we approve this item, there's not an actual commitment at this time, which still goes through the selection process, I believe in item 8.
Correct.
Enable that discussion?
Correct. This just puts in a placeholder for the James City County increase once we get to that project selection and allocation process. At that point, it would be up to TPS members to decide.
All right.
This is just to increase their ask.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll have any further discussion? Any motions from the floor?
Jamie with Isla White, I move that we approve the increased estimate.
Carolyn Murphy from City of Williamsburg, I second it.
All right, I have a motion and a second to have discussion on the motion.
Just confirming that this is only to increase the estimate, not to award the increased penciled in amounts.
Correct.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Have any further discussion, questions? Proceed with a roll call vote, please.
So I guess, okay, so we are going to vote independently, so we continue.
Apparently I have to unmute myself, then share. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Troy Eisenberger,
Yes.
Earl Sorey,
Yes.
Carol Rizzio,
Yes.
Lynn Keenan,
Yes.
Jamie Oliver,
Yes.
Paul Holt,
Yes.
Lisa Simpson,
Yes.
Brian Stilley,
Yes.
Rob Brown,
Yes.
Debbie Mandrasina,
Yes.
Carl Jackson,
Yes.
Robert Lewis,
Yes.
David German,
Yes.
Katie Shannon,
Yes.
Carolyn Murphy,
Yes.
Tim Cross,
Yes.
Barb Creel, Todd Hallisey,
Yes.
Sonia Holmans-Ponton,
Yes.
Eric Stringfield,
Yes.
Barbara Nelson,
Yes.
and Barb Creel. I'll check the chat. There she is. The motion passes.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, moving to item number 7, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Improvement Program and Regional Service Transportation Program update. Mr. House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I know everyone's eager to get to item number 8, John's item, but I thought it would be timely to talk to you all, give you an update on the CMAC and RSCP reconciliation efforts that VDOT has underway right now. So if I could ask, John, could you all pull up the presentation for me?
Sure thing.
Todd, you're a little faint. Can you shout a little bit?
Yes, sir. Is this better?
Yes, sir.
All right. So back at the last TPS meeting in June, Karen Borden and I provided information on recent efforts that VDOT was working on with TPO and locality staff on the financial health of the transportation programs. And if you recall, we presented information on efforts to reduce unexpended balances on state and federally funded projects and improve core burn rates. We also talked about maximizing the use of limited funding resources by shifting funding outwards in the 6-year plan to allocate CMAC and RSCP funding when needed based on the latest estimates and schedules. We've had a lot of discussions with John Mahaley and several localities across the region. You know, following the discussion at the June TPS, we did start sitting down with each locality and kind of going through their programs and some of the recommendations of shifting funding around that we saw looking at the program. Next slide. Oh, yeah, the agenda today, if you go, I'm sorry, I can go back one, John. So what I wanted to do today is give an update on the reconciliation effort following the June TPS meeting. But before I do that, I did want to talk about a new effort that we have underway right now of closing out CMAC projects and getting that residual funding put back on either new or active projects that are in the program. Next slide, please. All right, so first we'll talk about the project closeout. And joining me to help answer questions on the closeout and reconciliation efforts, I have Sonia Helms-Ponton, who I'm sure you all know. She's the lab and urban director for our district, but she's currently serving as the acting district programming director while we recruit for the position. That is a position that Karen Bourne was in, and Karen has joined central office in an awesome opportunity as the Assistant Division Administrator for Budget and Funds Management Division. So I know Karen's on the line with us right now. I just want to thank Karen. She's been helping us through this effort, and she's online right now to help address questions that you may have, and Sonia as well. So again, I just wanted to thank Karen for joining us today. This slide here, this is a reminder. We actually presented this particular slide back in June. This is the 2019 Virginia Acts of Assembly, which requires CMAQ funds to be federally obligated within 12 months of their allocation by the Commonwealth Transportation Board and expended within 36 months of such obligation. Also, we have listed here is the RSTP requirement. Again, just wanted to list that for everyone's information. Next slide. So in order to make sure that the state's in compliance with the 2019 Acts of Assembly, VDOT has reviewed completed CMAQ projects that were final vouchered prior to 2017 for closeout. So we looked at a large number of projects, and of the projects reviewed, we've identified 48 projects that have either a deficit or unexpended CMAQ funding. So, we're still working to verify the amounts, but right now we have potentially found about $2.8 million of CMAQ money that we need to reprogram to new or existing projects. So again, that's great news. I mean, extra money, I think it's pretty timely on the discussion that we're having today. So, we're going to be working with TPO staff and you over the next couple of months to verify the amounts that we've identified on projects and to identify projects that we want to actually reallocate these funds to. Now, I did want to note that, we are trying to have this funding reallocated prior to the update of the FY22 to 27 six-year improvement plan, which is being planned for June of this year. So I did want to mention that I know with COVID, the 21 to 26 six-year plan was delayed, and we just approved that back in December. But we are planning on being back on track, back on our normal schedule for a six-year plan development, and we are planning on approving the 22 to 27 six-year plan in June as normal. So, we want to make sure that these transfers take place prior to that adoption of the program. And I did want to note that while we're focused right now on CMAQ projects, we will be over the next few weeks shifting over to RSTP as well to see what remaining balances are on those projects and try to get those projects closed out also. Next slide. So to give everyone an opportunity to start reviewing the 48 projects that I mentioned on the previous slide, the next three slides list the project UPCs and the locality's name of the projects we'll be discussing with you all. So just thought we'd go ahead and give you a heads up, give you an opportunity to start pulling information for those projects, and we'll be sitting down with you soon to go over and verify the amounts. So here we show Chesapeake and Hampton. Next slide, please. This slide shows the district-wide projects, projects in Isle of Wight, James City, and Newport News. Next slide. And then finally, the projects in Norfolk, Portsmouth, Suffolk, Virginia Beach, and York County. So I believe this is part of the package, so and it'll be posted, so you'll be able to take a look at those projects ahead of time. Next slide. So our next steps on the closeout effort, we're going to be, talking to TPO, to John, and we're going to be reviewing the 48 projects to verify our records with the TPO's records to make sure we're all on the same page. And then in February, we're going to be reaching out to each of the localities that have projects to close out. and again, verifying the numbers in our records with you. And hopefully by March, we'll be able to confirm the data. You'll be able to confirm the data for us and confirm that the funding is available for transfer. And then in March and April, we'll meet with the TPS as necessary at the next upcoming meeting for the funding transfers and process TIP amendments as necessary for these projects. And again, finally, we hope to have the projects, the funding identified on new projects and transferred in the system for the draft 6-year plan in April-May timeframe, and definitely by the final program in June. So, I did say all that to say that we do have to have this funding on new projects. Otherwise, we could put it back to the balance entry in the TPO, but we would want to make sure by June, even if it goes back to the balance entry, we identify projects at the next TPS meeting and have the transfers completed by June. Otherwise, the funding, unfortunately, would be subject to reallocation at a statewide level. So we want to make sure we keep that money here in the region. That's everything I had on the closeout piece, which is the new effort. Is there any questions on that before I move on to the reconciliation update? All right, next slide, please. So again, now I just want to shift gears and update you all on what we've accomplished so far for the CMAQ and RSTP project reconciliation, and and talk to you a little bit about next steps moving forward. Next slide. So, since the TPS meeting over the summer and the fall, we've been working with John Mahaley and reviewing several localities projects and sitting down with localities and talking about the proposal to shift funding based on the locality schedules and estimates. We've had those discussions, and most of the localities that we met with were on board with the proposal that we presented. We did have some localities concerned with shifting funds in the out years, and a couple that had policies that prevented money from being shifted outwards in the 6-year plan. But all in all, it was pretty well received. So, from the fall through the present, we actually have moved forward with projects and actual TIP amendments, and we processed funding transfers for those projects that were identified, and we received concurrence from the locality to move forward. Now that we had the 6-year plan approved, the 21 to 26 6-year plan approved in December, and we have a lot of information that's changed since we did the effort in June, being estimates and schedules have changed. What we're doing, working with John, is we're reviewing the active project schedules, estimates, and allocations. So we're asking you all to make sure that the information in our system and the VDOT system is up to date and most accurate. So please, work with your project coordinators to make sure they have the latest estimates and schedules. And once we have that new data set, we'll be, reaching back out to you all and sitting down and talking a little bit more about, how we can try to best use the limited CMAQ and RSTP funds. Next slide, please. Again, this is next steps on what we plan on doing. So we'll hopefully have the new data set this month. We'll start sharing that with you all beginning next month. Again, try by the end of the month to get your estimates and schedules updated. Once we get localities to start confirming data, hopefully in March, we'll start working on a plan to reallocate the funding. And then April, we'll process any TIP amendments and funding transfers to redistribute the funding based on the schedules and estimates, and hope to have that completed by the draft 6-year plan in May and the final in June. So, again, I just wanted to mention that this is a pretty timely discussion. We're looking at different opportunities to free up CMAQ and RSTP money that we can reallocate to either new projects, existing projects, and really trying to make sure that we don't have money sitting on projects up front that won't be used for years in the future. We're really trying to reallocate to make sure that the money's there when it's needed and not just sitting, sitting there in the balance entry or sitting on the project's balance. Next slide. I included Sonia in my contact information if anybody has any questions after this meeting, but I am could open it up to questions if anybody has any questions right now.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you for you and the district staff and helping us all kind of do our square dance through the fund COVID funding and the changes we've had to endure lately. Appreciate all your assistance.
Yes, sir. Glad to do
Questions,
it.
comments from the floor? All right, hearing none. If you come with something later, please reach out to Todd or Sonia. We will move on to the main event. Item number 8, CMAQ and RSTP project selection and allocation process. John took his glasses off. It must be in for it now.
I had to take glasses off so I can see. All right. All right. Well, good morning. Today we'll be providing a presentation on the 2020 CMAQ and RSTP project selection and allocation process. As many of you know, the HRTPO is responsible for CMAQ and the RSTP program. And CMAQ is primarily for improving air quality in projects that help contribute the most toward that. And RSTP is a very flexible federal program for a variety of other projects. I've had a lot of questions very recently, and the fact that we do have some new TPS members, I figure is worthwhile to kind of go through a couple of our policies from our guide to the HRTPO, CMAQ, and RSTP project selection process. This update was from October 2018. As I mentioned earlier, when Katie had a question, we do plan to update our guide prior to the 2021 project selection process. And we do plan to have another TPS meeting in March. And at that point, I'd like to have any input. So take a look at the guide, and if you have any input on anything that you feel may need to be updated, I'd like to be able to discuss that at the March meeting. So as far as the funding policies, the priority for CMAQ and RSTP allocations is first previously approved and underway CMAQ RSTP projects, and we do try to fund those to completion. Then other ongoing project phases that are eligible for CMAQ and RSTP, and then thirdly, unfunded and new candidate projects are evaluated and ranked in order to be considered. Funding cost overruns. The annual cost is less than 10% on a CMAQ RSTP project. The locality or agency should notify the TTAC about this request with justification, and the TTAC can review it and recommend use of a reserve account or possibly commit future year fundings to the project. If the cost or annual allocation or scope of a project is more than 10%, then that's something we'll need to bring up to the HRTPO, the TTAC and the HRTPO board. And the recommendations can be any one of the following. And you can scale back the project, use local funds, use CMAQ RSTP reserve account funds, use existing funds from another project, use future CMAQ and RSTP allocations, or future non-CMAQ RSTP funds, or not. Something we don't want to do is drop the project. So there comes a point when you may have some surplus on CMAQ and RSTP allocations, and this is due to the award of funding from another program, such as Smart Scale. I had someone ask me this question just yesterday. So if you do get Smart Scale money, then we ask that you draw down the CMAQ and RSTP dollars so that you can use those on another one of your CMAQ RSTP projects, or it can be transferred to the CMAQ and RSTP reserve account so that some other localities and agencies can use those funds. And this is within, as you see the note on the bottom, this is within 90 days after VDOT or DRPT confirms that it's an approved CMAQ, that an approved CMAQ RSTP project is overfunded due to receipt of funding from another funding program. So here's what we have available in fiscal year 27. The total mark, including federal and state match for CMAC, is 15.3 million, and for RSTP, it's a little over 37 million. Don't get too excited yet. We know what the real numbers are, right? What the real numbers are as of right now. And this is if all the penciled in amounts are funded. So the CMAC, we're starting with about 14.4 million, as we discussed earlier. And the total for RSTP is about 9.6 million. And that's before consideration of the pending request from James City County, the amount of about $6.7 million. We do have some CMAC and RSTP reserves still out there. This is for fiscal year 20 to 26. And as you can see, we don't have any CMAC reserves until fiscal year 22, and we don't have any RSTP reserves until fiscal year 24. But we do have a fair number here to work with, over $5 million in total reserves for CMAC and RSTP. But most of that money is in some of the outer years. I know this is a little hard to see on the screen. Hopefully you do have the CMAC previously approved projects and ranked candidate projects pulled up, and or you have a copy of that. And we did discuss this already. Jeff pulled this up. We have previously approved projects. Total penciled in requests for CMAC projects is 895,000. That number is usually higher. We just happen to have a lot of fully funded CMAC projects right now, so that's good news. I don't know where my presentation went just now. Let's try to do that again. It disappeared on your end too, right? Let's see if that comes up again. Okay, can you see that again now?
It's coming.
Oh, it's still spinning.
No, it's up, John.
All right, thank you very much. Trying to overpower this laptop here. So we do have new candidate projects for CMAC. We have 24 new candidate projects, and they're ranked in order here, the composite ranking. And the 14.6 million is the total request for if all of these projects were funded. Another point I like to bring up on this is that if all of these projects were funded, you can't just look at the fiscal year 27 request. You have to look at the total request. So the total out year request is 109 million. Now, if we were to fund all of these projects and to completion, and there were no other requests for CMAC funding, it would take at 15 million a year, it'd take looks like about 7 years and 3 months to fund all these projects. So it's just consideration. Now, year one is usually the PE and maybe some right of way. So we're always going to have that first year of funding is going to be a little lower, but just be careful looking at what we buy here. We would not have another CMAC process for the foreseeable future. Just something to be aware of there. So we also like to keep about a 5% reserve in any fiscal year for CMAC and RSTP out year allocations. And if we were to keep a 5% reserve for the CMAC for fiscal year 27, that would be about 750,000. We don't always get to that number, but we usually do try to keep a little bit of money in reserve just in case the marks go up or down, and we don't know that until we get closer to that year. And just a note on the bottom of this slide, this was not prepared in October of 2016. I assure you this was done in 2020 in the August and September time range. All right, so this is the RSTP previously approved and new applications. Now, just as a reminder, if y'all remember, a few years ago, we began using the HRTPO prioritization tool for primarily highway type projects. A lot of these projects already had a 2040 score. I know we're working on the 2045, but this is, apples to apples. We had to utilize the 2040 tool to score these projects. So you'll see that there's a score max of 300 for the applications that were scored with the HRTPO prioritization tool. And you may ask, why? Ever since, I've been here at least, we've been trying to make all of our processes, especially for project applications and scoring, be much more quantitative in nature. And the HRTPO prioritization tool is a much more quantifiable resource to utilize. We do have other projects, new projects scored using the existing RSTP tool, which the score max is 100. So we'll have to look at these two sets of project scores a little separately. So the top scoring using the RSTP scoring process was 67. That's for the Norfolk Brambleton Avenue Bridge Rehab Project. And as you all know, or most of you should know, we do have on RSTP, we try to do a split of about 60 highway and 40 non-highway. We do have a couple of non-highway applications using the RSTP scoring process, and you see those here. So this is just to give you a little background of how these are scored. Wanted to add the scoring process for the 2021. We are gearing toward being able to score all of our RSTP projects using the HRTPO prioritization tool, and that'll make this the last year we do this hybrid approach, and we'll have a fully quantified approach to the scoring of RSTP projects. That's something we've been working on for a while. But today, the recommended action is to provide a recommended set of CMEC and RSTP projects and allocations for fiscal year 2027 funding for consideration by the TTAC in February of 2021. That's all I have for you for now.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. And let me try to stop sharing here.
This is Carol with Gloucester County. Can I make a comment?
Yes, ma'am.
Sure.
Good afternoon, or good morning, I should say. The line on the RSTP for Gloucester County, line number 26, it's showing 175,000 requests for a planning study. We actually had revised that application and requested 250. I don't know if that correction can be made.
Sure. Can you make that correction, Jeff? That's 250 across the board, total cost, total request, total 27 requests?
Yes. Thank you.
Anyone else have anything they see that doesn't look quite right on the list? All right.
The first thing I'll do here is update the James City after the previous action to the 9 million. So that number is there for everybody to see.
Hey, Jeff, if you don't mind, would you be able to bump up that resolution a little bit as we go through the table when we get to each line? That's better. Can everybody see that a little better?
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Should be Pocahontas Trail. Oh, how James City County got twice.
I never thought I'd miss a projector in the wall. Question I have for RSTP, just for my notification, I see the Sipsa flyover is included, as well as Chesapeake has 460, 58, 13. I'm assuming those are at disparate locations, that they're not tied together in any way.
Correct, Mr. Chairman. They're two separate projects. They provide separate utility.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have discussion for path forward for allocations or any particular project notes?
This is Jamie with Isle of Wight.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm just wondering, does the TPO have any ideas or recommendations or thoughts as far as the request for the flyover?
Believe when Bob spoke in its endorsement, that was their position.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is Bob Crum. Our suggestion would be, this is not a board suggestion, that would be my request. And first off, I just want to stress, you have an incredibly difficult job here with an oversubscribed program and very many great projects across the board. If it's at all possible to be able to work that flyover in somewhere within the program to get it started, I think that Liesl, your city managers, your county administrators, and DDOT are going to have to try to patch together a series of programmatic funding sources here. And I think that if there's any possibility to incorporate it and get some money on it somewhere in the program so that maybe as projects advance later, there might be some opportunity for flexibility to move monies around, that would be our request. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
If we do choose to fund the Sipsa project, it seems like it's more appropriate to fund with reserve than with FY27, since we already know the FY27 funding does not coordinate with the proposed schedule.
Can I speak to that, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're talking about, Katie, and I think everyone else can see that as well. Since the Sipsa project is not a previously approved project, it's not in the program yet, then without approving it as a project, then we don't have that flexibility to be able to utilize some of the other funding that we've discussed already today, such as the reserve funds, CMAC and RSTP. We have the closeout of the CMAC projects, which is the 2.8 million. I would expect the RSTP closeout figure to be even higher than that. And plus, we do have projects in out years that may or may not continue. So while other funding is being identified, this would allow the Sipsa project to get into the bucket, and then we can start taking a look at some of the flexibility that we do have available within the CMAC and RSTP programs. Thanks.
I guess towards Katie's point, if we create the project now, we'd have to come back to the next meeting or some future meeting for an allocation from the reserve. I'm going to go on the assumption that there's no detrimental impact to the overall schedule if we did that.
Correct.
All right. To kind of move things along a little bit, do we have any objection to putting in the penciled in requests for the previously approved projects and using that to start winnowing down the available funding we've got for 27? All right, hearing.
I agree with that. With the one exception on the Pocahontas Trail, do we want to spread that between CMAC and RSTP so RSTP is not taking the entire hit, or look at FY27 maybe with FY28 as well?
Yeah, thanks. I forgot that wasn't a $2 million hit anymore. Yeah, let's pencil in the other 6 and see what our new balance for 27 is.
And maybe look at the CMAC as well, since it's eligible for both.
Yes.
Before doing anything with Pocahontas, that leaves a little over 11 million, 11.6 it looks like, in the 60-40 split, 7.2 highway and 4.8 non-highway available, 27 RSTP. CMAC, if we want to add a line here, Pocahontas. Bump this up as well. However, you want to split this, if at all. Yeah.
Should we plug in the 2.3 million that was already penciled in for Pocahontas, or you want to hold off on that, Mr. Chair?
I get a feeling from the group.
I agree with that.
Any objections? All right, yes, let's pencil that in.
Now your highway balance is at 5.8 million, non-highway unaffected at the 3.8.
You say that again?
Highway balance at 5.795 million, non-highway 3.863.
So if I'm doing the math right in my head, even if we did fund the rest of the Pocahontas, we would have to shift the highway non-highway balance.
Appears to be true, yes.
Well, you know, that's calculating on the available fund after the penciled in. So that'll recalculate if you put any more into the penciled in amounts. You know, with the commitment to complete, it's only 64 is available after pencil in.
This is Jamie again. Just to clarify, the non-highway is usually trails and public transit, that sort of stuff, right? And Pocahontas is actually multimodal, so it would qualify as both?
No.
It's just a highway project?
It was approved as a highway project, Jamie.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it sounds like there's about 6.75 million left for the Pocahontas Trail to get fully funded. Could we divide that and have some on CMAX and then some on the FY28 RSTP? Paul, would that completely throw the project off if we move some of it to year 2 as a penciled in request?
I think it might delay the project. I need to check back with VDOT on that, but like I say, since construction is scheduled to begin in 26 and not go into 28, it might delay that phase.
Is the 1-year delay something that you guys could live with, knowing that it also kept Croker on schedule?
Just worried about that federal highway 10-year rule. I mean, we've already been,
Gotcha.
I think, getting extensions. That's my only concern there. And like I say, I'm always worried about, if we don't have it fully funded, I'm not going to be able to move into the right-of-way phase either. You know, I understand the let's like to try to do as much as we could do. You know what I mean?
I have a suggestion. I don't know if this is helpful or not to anyone else who has the penciled in figures for fiscal year 27. I do notice that we have a few projects that have a fiscal year 28 request. Is there any way that we can adjust those numbers or any the localities or agencies involved there, adjust those numbers slightly to allow us just a little more flexibility for these penciled in numbers in 27?
This is Troy from Chesapeake. Speaking on ours, George Washington Highway widening, we've already started design on this project, so that's a number that's part of our project delivery schedule. So we would like to keep that as is right now because, like I said, this project's under design, and that's a commitment we're scheduled to make.
Okay.
For Virginia Beach, for ours, I would say, you know, we get similar. And then I'm also looking at the totals for FY28 and 23, 33, 34. I mean, we're at like almost 40 million. Yeah.
We already don't have enough in 28.
Yeah.
39 million.
So for fiscal year 28 for the bus replacement for HRT at 23.5 million, does that new source of dedicated funding stream that HRT gets, would that get at some of that between 28 and 29, you know, that almost 34 million, 33 million?
I don't believe we have anybody from HRT on the.
Yeah, I don't believe so.
But given the slate of projects, I don't believe they had a that big of a bite of the apple towards bus replacement in the recent request for disbursement from HRT.
What about some of the reserve funding for RSTP CMAC as well?
We do have some of that available. For fiscal year 26, for CMAC, we have 1.4 million. And for fiscal year 25 in RSTP, there's 1.7 million. So we do have funds available there if the group would like to address that.
I mean, my preference would be to spread it out a little bit more so that we could maybe introduce 1 or 2 new RSTP projects this go around. Obviously, I'm biased because Virginia Beach is one of the higher scoring ones, but that would be my preference.
So there's a total of 3.096293 million available between 22 and 26 for CMAC alone. And then there's 2.208117 available for RSTP. That would clear out our reserves for both of those programs through fiscal year 26. I guess if I were to suggest something, it's just looking at the numbers. I would look at those two years where we do have a fair amount of reserve available. So for fiscal year 26 in CMAC, we have the 1.4 million available, and in the fiscal year 25 for RSTP, we have the 1.7 million available. If we could leave maybe say 300,000 in each of those buckets, then those are certainly possibilities that we could help to offset some of that James City County request that we've been discussing.
I like that recommendation, and then also maybe adding some FY27 CMAQ money to it.
Okay.
My apologies, number salad came past quick. If we take the 300,000 reserve, what's our available capacity for the two programs?
All right. So if we take 1.1 million in fiscal year 26 CMAQ reserves, and then we take 1.4 million in fiscal year 25 RSTP. Okay.
All right.
All right. That's going to give us 2.5 million if the group recommends those transfers from the reserve for the Pocahontas Trail project. That's a total of 2.5 million. So if we can, if you all agree with that, then that can bring that ask for James City County down by 2.5 million.
All right. Does anyone have an objection to penciling that in for right now?
I don't have any objection to penciling it in, but does that leave anything in reserve for those years?
Yes, it does. It leaves a little over 300,000 in each of those buckets.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Jack, if you'll pencil that in for us and see how it looks.
I don't have that right table. I'm trying to get to it.
I have it marked down on my copy here. But those are the monies that are available.
A separate action, the allocation.
Yeah, that would be a separate action, but we could add that to the end of when we get to the end and we fill in all the tables. We can change that action.
But you're reducing now the ask you by 2.5 million or 1.5 is what
2.5 million, Jeff.
So we'll reduce this by 2.5.
So now we're looking at a 4.3 shortfall around numbers.
Yeah.
For the project.
Right.
All right, looking for ideas from the floor for the next step to get us closer to the destination.
This is Troy from Chesapeake. Is there any merits to looking, one of the things that kind of is still in my mind is when John said that CMAQ program basically locks it up for 7 years. A lot of some of the projects on the bottom of that list really didn't have to compete against any other projects. This was just, let's fund the whole list. Is there any merit at looking at using some of that CMAQ money, both in the sense to kind of pick the higher scoring projects in CMAQ and also to give us flexibility in some of the out years to not necessarily fund the full list of CMAQ and use some of that money to provide relief to Pocahontas?
I was thinking that too, Troy. This is Katie with Virginia Beach. I was thinking, why would we only fund maybe half of the CMAQ projects just so that we don't tie up the CMAQ program for the next 6 or 7 years?
Mr. Chair, this is Carl from Portsmouth. I'm just hoping that we can still reserve some money to fund.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Carl, but could you please speak up? I can't hear you at all for the minute.
Okay, how about now? Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Okay, my apologies. Yes, I was just hoping that we can reserve enough funding in CMAQ for some new projects that are under $1 million, that may not have scored very high, but they're very low cost projects that could, still have a big bang, so I'm just hoping that, we're still able to fund a large chunk of those new projects in CMAQ.
Looking at our list here, I can see 3 or 4 that are under $1 million. There's a couple of those that sky the top 8 or 10.
I guess if you're looking further down on the list, I don't have it right in front of, okay, here it is. Well, if you're looking at, for just the year one, FY27, you got quite a few of those that are, under $1 million, that are new projects, which I'm hoping that we can hold some money to fund those projects as well.
All right, other questions, ideas, comments on the ideas we've got? Looking at the CMAC list, one of the few that has the luxury of not having anything on it. So I'm making a suggestion, idea, but I'd like to hear, especially from the localities that will be heavily affected by whatever shift and change that we're discussing.
If we fund all 24,
Looking at all 24, the fiscal 27 request is pretty manageable. But then you look at the table that's included in the agenda package, and your total request number is $100 million. That's no new CMAC projects for about 7 years.
Right.
So, I mean, I would suggest we look at funding the top third or the top 50%.
All right, well, let's, can y'all do some math on the spreadsheets for us? If we do the top,
previously approved.
Well, I was looking at 23. So if we take to the top 8 of new candidate projects from the scoring, where the numbers bear out.
Well, what did you want to put in for Pocahontas on the previous?
I just want to go with what we've got on the list right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a feasibility check, if nothing else.
One, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A balance of 8.8 million existing, previously approved in the first 8.
What's my total request for those 8? The question is, where is the breakover point for filling up not just the 27 money, but 28, 29, 30? And where do we stop running out of money?
Those first 8 have a total request of 11,271,000.
That would be doable.
You can see the out-year request on those. So at 28, the penciled in amount for those is a little over 2 million.
All right, so taking the top 8, that gives us almost 6 million left in fiscal 27 to play with.
8.8.
8.8 left.
Before.
Yeah, but remember reserve too.
So we could fund the rest of Pocahontas and keep money in the reserve for FY27.
Correct. And then it looks like there's also a couple other smaller dollar projects if you'd like to take a look at those on CMAC side as well.
Yes, let's plug the Pocahontas number in. The balance of the 6, whatever it is. Or 4, whatever the.
And we are now, it's 2.5 million less after the reserve allocation, if that goes through.
No, this 6 you've got is the request less than 2.5.
Yeah.
And then we penciled in the CMAC, the original request of 2.3 something.
Well, we already have that on the RSTP. That was the
So
RSTP.
to get the balance, it's not the 2.5, it's the RSTP number.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the difference.
4.137656.
No, the math here shouldn't be 2.5. It should be whatever you've got in the RSTP request. Or not request. RSTP.
Half were already taken off the top.
Yeah, that was taken out.
Oh, okay.
So 2381.
Right.
Out of the, yeah.
Yeah, so it's the 6.6. Yeah.
6.6 minus 2.381 that you put in CMAC, or in RSTP.
Yeah, the 2.3 is already in the RSTP here.
Right, so to get the balance for in CMAC, you have to take the RSTP out.
Which leaves now a balance in 27 CMAC of 2.165 million.
The 6.6 proposed allocation needs to have the CMAC allocation taken out of it, or the RSTP allocation taken out.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Right, this all runs together after a while. All right, now we're cooking with gas.
4.5 million.
All right, so if we come down the new candidate projects, how many more can we fit in and still have a couple $100,000 in reserve?
Do you want me to just keep entering down?
Yeah, let's go until we end up with $500,000 or so in the balance.
But it's also is gonna.
Yeah, look at total cost.
It's also going to impact the years to come. So I would suggest we have a little bit more in reserve.
All right.
The 5%, I'm sorry, the 5% number would be 750,000.
All right.
Can you total what the year 2 requests for all those projects would be though as well?
Sure. Getting down to project 17 leaves a balance of 800,000.
All right, let's stop there and total up year 2.
Then in FY28, those have a total need of 7.9 million.
I think year 3 is going to be your hit because that's a couple of big numbers down the line.
Year 3 is just at the 15.9 million, right? Year 4 down to 3.8.
And so year 3 looks a little tight, but the rest looks reasonably doable. Just looking at the biggest number on that line, Troy, for the safety improvements project, is there potential for other funding source that could reduce that or split it to an additional year maybe?
Other than, some miracle from HSIP coming back, this is one that we put in. We went ahead and put in Smart Scale, but for the reasons that were brought up when the submission of Sipsa, the flyover into Smart Scale, this is one that we don't anticipate will score well in Smart Scale because it's a $14 million safety project that doesn't provide much congestion relief. So this is the primary way we see delivering, what are, the similar. We've talked about this corridor. These are crucial safety improvements. So this is kind of our main path forward on this project.
All right, I appreciate it.
And just as well, while it's on topic, I guess a question for John. You mentioned that the RSTP CMAC guidelines say that if Smart Scale money comes in, that provides the ability to shift funding. If Smart Scale funding comes in, does it give us the ability to add projects that that wouldn't necessarily be in the bucket? So, like for example, if if one of these ones that we're giving money to ends up getting smart scale, does that shuffle the deck at all?
Not as far as approved projects. It would have to be approved as part of this process first. But if it's already a previously approved project, then you can certainly transfer monies over to that other approved project.
Mr. Chair, this is Robert Lewis.
Yes, sir.
In difference to Troy, and I appreciate what he's trying to do, I would note for the group, that is such a large, expensive project that were that not there, you would fund several more projects below that in totality. So again, you know, as we're looking to balance this out, we have limited resources on that, and I'll just offer that as a comment.
Like I said, further to that question, is there potential for that project to be broken up by phase, or is it really a, you know, start to finish needs to be one item?
Are you muted?
What we could do, and it's you know, it's ideally when we want, you know, with a corridor like that, we want to, you know, it's acceleration lanes, it's arc cuts, and they kind of work in concert. So there's ideally it would function in that. What we could do is we could split the year 3 ask between 3 and 4. It doesn't necessarily help us in 27, but that's one thing we could do is split that between split that 9.8 between 3 and 4.
All right, that's something you're comfortable committing to now, or?
Yes.
All right. I appreciate it. Jeff, you can make that modification.
Yep.
If that's a paper adding machine, it brings
I'm as old school as it gets, man.
Forget Jeff's already retired first time.
I get it over here. Might as well let the computer do it.
All right, so that should give us almost $5 million in year 3 capacity for new projects.
That'll be the new total right here. Yeah, it brings it down from down to 10.98, which would be penciled in as opposed to the 15 or 16 we were at.
All right. Question to the group with the funding the way we have it shown now, is there any concerns, objections, questions? All right, hearing none, let's come back to the RSTP side and see what numbers we got to play with.
With Pocahontas now addressed fully, there's 5.795 highway balance and 3.8 non-highway balance for a new project.
All right.
I don't know if we wanted to start with the Sipsa or elsewhere.
I'd like to hear from the floor recommendations. You know, who wants to champion what?
Mr. Chair, this is Eric from VDOT. Could I make a recommendation?
Certainly.
I think you should start with Sipsa first by trying to get some amount of money on it to make it designated as a project, so it is eligible for having money shifted from older projects if they're canceled or if there's additional reserve money that shows up.
All right. Additional discussion, please.
Would now also be the time to change that total cost number to the 40 million?
That's the 40 million is not exact. I think that's rounded up, but this project was scored based on the earlier number. The new total just came out very recently.
I guess if we entered in at 23, they would have to have some modifying action
in the future. Yes.
All right. I see the merit to adding it into the program. Is there a warm fuzzy number that anyone has for that entry, or starting point at least?
And please don't say $1.
All right. Eric, for planning purposes, is there a minimum?
Mr. Chair, I didn't hear you.
Is there a minimum threshold of what would be utility money for it? You know, where you'd actually be able to start moving forward with some level of activity, or is it?
The Sipsa commitment was already 5, so I would think maybe match the 5 or half match it half with a 2.5. Let me see.
They're asking for 1.5.
They're asking for 1.5.
Yeah, it's only so if you could get to 1.5, that would be sufficient, I guess.
All right.
I was going to ask like 500,000 because again, we know that this FY27 money isn't even what they need. It's just to get them into the program.
Right.
All right. I can get behind $500,000. If any other comment, question, discussion from the group on that?
This is
Go ahead, Jamie.
I mean, I just wanted to say I support putting them in the program, but I think we need to realize that what we're saying is the possibility of them finding 35 million between now and FY27 in this pot seems unlikely.
Yeah, I think they're looking to find whatever funding streams they can, and this would be one portion of it. Their own funds be a portion, and whatever other things that either the Commonwealth or through some grant program they can put together.
Yeah, if I could add to that just real quick, hopefully, Jamie, this will help out there. I illustrated a few different options for the earlier year funding if SIPSA were included in this 27 funding. They are looking at some other funding sources, of course. The other thing to consider is there is another round of build coming up too. Now, although those monies would be within their project schedule too. Hopefully that program, the way they look at the projects will change a little bit. We've pretty much been shut out in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I'm hoping that maybe that'll change in the future. And with, unfortunately, the safety incidents, those weren't included in the most recent build application, and that it may score much better in the next round. So anyway, this opens up flexibility for a lot of other things that could happen with it for this project. But without this, the opportunities are very, very limited. So anyway, just my 2 cents on that. Thanks.
Other localities, agencies.
To Jamie's point too.
Go ahead.
All right, this is Robert Lewis. One comment I will share, and I think I've shared this with Sipsa. I know they're struggling to find money, but they've got to be extremely careful because when you put the first federal dollar on this project, you just open Pandora's box as to a multitude of other rules, regulations, and requirements, and the probability that the price will escalate. I know they're struggling to find money, but sometimes free federal money is not free.
Yes, sir.
That's an excellent point, Robert. And I would also say too, to Jamie's point earlier, with us putting $1 on this, this is pretty much, this project will take priority and get any excess funding that is, you know, scrubbed out of the program. And I think we just all need to be aware of that.
Well, and I guess too, I have a concern that they have to get to 40 million at some point to go to construction. So I don't know how helpful it is for us to put, you know, 3 dimes on the project when they have to get to $100 before anything happens. But I mean, I don't have a problem putting it in there if they think it'll help. I'm just concerned that this really isn't as likely of an avenue as we're making it sound.
Yeah, I agree with you for it's a tall hill they've got to climb. I do believe that we have a need to help them on their journey. All right, so we've heard $1.5 million, we've heard $500,000. Does anyone else have hard feeling towards any number to put on it?
Mr. Chairman, this is Tim Cross, York County.
Right.
Of those 2 options, I would say 500,000, but I'd just like to voice my objection to moving Sipsa project to the head of the line this way. We do have a scoring process for a reason, and I'm not sure. I mean, we heard a lot about the various project benefits in terms of economic impact this morning and safety and whatnot, and yet the project did not score very well. And so I realize I'm in the minority, but I think that we should follow the scoring process in terms of prioritizing our allocation recommendations. That's all.
Yes, I think you have a valid point there. All right. Other opinions from around the room?
Chair, could I ask one question?
Certainly.
What effect does this process have on the 2045 long range plan? You know, this project, the 460-5813 connector is listed as a highway project. It was scored 126. Will it have any impact on what's going on with the long range plan process?
I believe it's already because the operating agencies put money on it, it would already be a committed project. I don't think inclusion of RSTP would affect that. But I defer to the TPO staff.
Yeah, that's not my area, but for the LRTP, I know that they are working on the fiscal constraint numbers right now. I'd have to drop back and check with Dale on that. I don't know exactly how that's listed in the list of projects right now. But this is based on the 2040 tool, so it's, you know, not part of the 2045 for this process.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so in the interest of at least getting some pencil numbers, Jeff, you put $500,000 on that project, and then we'll start going down through the list, see what sort of other things we can plug in.
The highest scoring new transportation was Alaskan Road Phase 3, just under 3.7 million in 27.
Right.
And then the other part of Alaskan looks like it'll get close to the 5.2 highway balance, those two.
Our priority would be the first one, Laskin Phase 3, and we would be okay with just funding that and then spreading the rest out to another project. I know there's the non-HRTPO prioritization tool project as well.
Yeah. Katie, for the out years, you're looking at seven plus a year.
No, nope, that's for
yeah, for the 1B.
Yes, for 1B.
But the 3 is 4 million, 5 million, 9 million.
Right.
Yep. So it's essentially by phase.
Yeah, the same question I posed to Chesapeake. Is there a potential or a plan for additional funding or alternate funding to offset those amounts?
We have a smart scale application in for Laskin Phase 3 right now, so we'll find out in the next couple of weeks on that one. And you know, Virginia Beach has a history of putting local money on our projects as well, so I foresee that coming in the future as well.
All right, thank you. So from what you said, it sounds like application number 10, York County would be next in line, or looks like partial funding. Tim, is that something that you can be able to?
Yes, we would like to have partial funding, whatever we can get on that project.
All right, any objection to pencil in partial funding and putting the rest in out year? Hearing none, Jeff, if you'll do that for us.
Do we want to leave some reserve balance or do we want to empty it?
If we could leave some reserve at least.
So if we say $1.5 million, here leave the reserve in the highway 126.
All right.
And then
what's our next scoring in the non-highway category?
But then to balance the 5.6, we're down to what, 4.5, 4.1, right?
Yes.
So that's 2 million.
Mr. Chair, just a quick comment here. There are applications that were scored using the RSTP tool that are still fall under highway. If once you get that completed, Jeff, if you want to kind of scroll down to that next category. I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of those as well.
400, 300, York.
So how do you compare the two scoring mechanisms?
They're different. That's the thing. One is based on 300 points. The other is based on 100 points. So they're top scores of each of those categories or each of those scoring mechanisms. That won't be the issue next round, but this will be the last time we have this hybrid approach.
All right, I guess the question is though, how do you compare the top of each category? Are they? It's not a simple.
They're in this case apples and oranges as far as the mechanism that we score them by. So that's why we try to separate it from mostly highway type projects, and except for there's a corridor, the active trans project there. These are let me see, bridge replacements. I think we have a safety project, and then there's another safety project with lighting, some corridor improvements. So there are different types of projects. So. And this is how we have done it in the past before we started using the HRTPO prioritization tool for mainly highway projects. We always had the categories split up like this.
All right.
So I just wanted to make mention of that, just so I know I don't want to make it any more difficult for anybody, but just a consideration.
Sorry, after lunch we're going to cure cancer. All right. Well, I guess moving, kind of where we're headed, the non-highway balance. Do we have projects that fall into that we can touch?
Yeah, the two water projects. Yeah.
All right. Well, looks like you got the shortfall for the second one.
Yeah, maybe they only buy 4 buses or we spread it over 2 years.
Do we have water on the call today?
I think Barb's there, but I don't think her microphone's working, Mr. Chair.
All right.
You can type into the chat, maybe.
I'm trying to chat. Can anybody hear me? Hi,
Yes.
Hi there. I'm on. I'm here. I had to. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sorry, I had to jump to another meeting. This was scheduled to go longer, so I switched to the phone. I'm still here.
Okay.
Can you hear me? So I'm sorry. Could I can. Okay. Okay. This is Barb from WADA.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. If the 3.7 is funded under CMAC, then we wouldn't need it in RSTP. It's the same project.
All right. We funded in CMAC.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
All right.
So we're not. Yes, and then we wouldn't need it under the RSTP.
The first easy thing today. Thank you.
That was rather fortuitous.
We're sitting at 3.5 in non-highway. So I guess the question is, are we better suited to put in through RSTP and free up some of the CMAC money? Or is there some other use we'd like to do with this RSTP funds?
Could we fund that Norfolk Bridge project? Is that considered non-highway?
Yeah, well, it's top scoring, and it's a bridge rehab, so that would certainly qualify.
And it was the top scoring project.
It was the top,
the,
yeah, of the RSTP scoring method that we've been using.
That sounds like a winner for me.
it'd have a somewhat of a deficit, right? So it'd be like 3 million.
Right. What was available, Jeff?
It's $1 short.
You got 3.5 in the non-highway and 100 and some thousand in the highway.
Yeah. If we wanted to. Make this out here the extra $1 million.
And that leaves us
a reserve of 630,000.
All right. So from the floor, is everybody content with the penciling in that we've got for these two funds? Any objections?
With that kind of reserve, should we look at the, before you scroll up too fast, should we look back at that Gloucester County one? It seemed like a smaller project that would fully fund it. $250.
And I can talk about that just a little bit. So that is on Route 17, the corridor of statewide significance that is showing congestion right now. We did apply for a smart scale project, so we'll know in a couple weeks if we get it. This is to, if we don't get that, probably the missing piece is a study to determine if it's a widening or just some access management that is needed. So it's great if you put it in, we may not need it. I'm also okay with waiting. So whatever the will of the board.
It's a study or a project?
It's a study.
If we're going to look at other projects, I would also suggest possibly the York County one that was only 600,000 that we skipped over.
All right, so if we put the 600,000 in, we would have what, like a $70,000 reserve?
30,000.
30,000 reserve.
Could we split out the 600,000 to 2 years? I don't, if York County could comment on that.
That would be acceptable.
All right. So now we're looking at about $300,000 in reserve here. And if you put the 250 in, you're down to 40?
80.
80? What's the reserve we're holding in CMAC?
For CMAC, we were, if we were to stick to a 5% reserve, it'd be a 750,000. But that's, you know, what we try to do. It doesn't have to be.
Right, and
we've proposed so far.
RSTP, you'd be down a reserve below 1%. You know, I stated before, I know a few people that doesn't have any skin in the game for RSTP. Is everyone content in the understanding that if you need more RSTP, it's not there to get? If there's no objections, I don't have AC3 needs two funding plans for approval. Anyone have any last conversation?
Mr. Chair, could we go back to the reserve for CMAC?
Certainly.
So I guess we're not necessarily, required to hold that 5%. Is there any way that we can go further down on the list using some of that reserve?
So if we put the next two in 300 apiece, that would get us to where we have 200 in reserve. The question I'd have for that is, so what's our year two total if we do that? Adding in 4 million or so to the total.
That makes year two, if you go down Wilroy and Constance, brings that to 11.9 year two.
Right.
And then 12, just a little over 12 million in year three.
All right.
So I guess the issue with going further down the list is the year two funding. But you know, if you look at like project number 22, I'm not sure if we have any additional year funding on that. Scroll down to that one.
Yeah, you got 725 for the next 4 years.
Okay, is that shown on the list here? Would it be possible to at least get funding for year one on that project? I understand there's a ranking system and everything, but just trying to see, since it's a very low cost project, if you could move any further up, or if some money could be put on that project.
I have comments from the group.
Suffolk would not be in favor of skipping 4 projects to get down there. I know Carl's trying to make it happen, but we all have needs.
Yeah, I would just add to echo that. I mean, it's referred to as a low-cost project, but we jumping 4 projects that are actually lower in cost.
Oh, yeah, I hear what everyone is saying. It's just, I guess, from the beginning of the meeting, we had more CMAC, but I guess we decided to give money for the Pocahontas Trail. You know, I think originally we could have funded all of these CMAC projects, you know, but because of that, you know, now we're left with a lot of CMAC that aren't funded, so.
All right, Robert, while we've got you, is there a heavy push to include Wheelwood Road and Constance? Or would you take more control?
We would be supportive of adding that in if we could make it work.
All right. Have any objections from the group in reducing the reserve to 200,000 to add those two projects in?
My only concern again is just that we're adding a ton of new CMAQ projects that might hamstring the program for the coming years. Maybe just one of them as opposed to both.
All right. Any comment for that?
You know, and I understand the concern, but you know, again, CMAQ was already you know, hamstrung when we decided to put some of the money on Pocahontas Trail. You know, and you know, I guess some of us came into the meeting thinking one thing, and now that money has disappeared, and so a lot of these new projects will not be funded. You know, so. And, you know, I understand that was the decision of the group, but, you know, it's leaving some localities out, you know, as far as funding.
Hey, this is Lynn from Hampton. I'll echo Carl's comment as poor little number 16 there is the donut hole for Hampton that is not getting any money. So I agree with what he's saying.
All right, I still have a variety of opinions for the reserve. Here, put in one, put in two, put in none. Do we have any sort of concurrence to change from what we've got sitting on the board now?
This is Jamie with Isle of Wight. I would concur with putting at least one more project in, but I do think we need to look at our reserve because we do tend to use it as the years go by, and 200,000 is really not that much for transportation.
All right. Any other opinions from the group?
I like the idea of funding two more and just taking the chance. Again, we have the hope the General Assembly and the federal government eventually is going to deal with this issue. And I would support adding two more.
I concur.
Well, here's a question I have, Mr. Chair. Do those two projects, do they both have to be Suffolk projects? You know, can we spread the money around some more instead of just to the same city?
The difficulty I see in that is Suffolk has three projects that are right there in a row at a couple $100,000 that fit into the program. Hampton, if we go to that project, we can partially fund it, but not fully, you know, for the ask. I saw a note from what are your projects and close out list free of any reserve? John, I don't believe that any of the closeout funds would come back to the MPO. They don't come.
No, not yet. We won't know that until March, how that shakes out.
Oh, yeah, so I would be hesitant to bank on that funding as being available to us for reserve.
And it would end up being previous year funding, and it would need to be spent right away.
Thank you.
This is Lynn from Hampton. For any of the projects that had also applied through Smart Scale, do we have any inclination of where they stand, if they're at all viable candidates?
I believe at this point, you only know if you've been screened in or out.
Yeah.
And John,
Mr. Chair, could I add a comment for the?
Sure.
For the Smart Scale, staff recommended scenario scoring will be out on the 19th in a CTP presentation, so you guys can all be aware to, if you can, catch the CTP meeting on the 19th.
John, this is Paul. I seem to recall in previous years, our standing commitment has always been, once we figure out what Smart Scale is doing, we always kind of come back and see what CMAC and RSTP funds may be freed up by those Smart Scale actions. And if so, we revisit this list and see how much further we can keep going, correct?
Well, we would revisit the projects that received the Smart Scale funding. We wouldn't go back into project selection mode. Now, the only thing we could do is we could suspend our project selection process possibly, but we don't want to get too far into the future on that because we're going to be right up against the 22-27 program.
Well, I mean, I only said that because I heard a couple of times on here that we've have a couple projects that are on this list that have applied for Smart Scale. And so if Smart Scale funds come in and otherwise free up CMAC and RSTP, that would presumably increase the available balance that we could relook at this list.
Yeah. Once the list is approved, then we don't go back to it until next year's process.
Yeah,
I understand what you're saying. I mean, we could, like I said, we could suspend this and not supply RSTP new projects to the TTAC and to the board. But if we do that and we wait to hear from Smart Scale, then that might put us a little bit too close to getting these projects approved.
Yeah, I concur with that, John. Chesapeake, doesn't support that. We're talking FY27. So in terms of corrections based on Smart Scale, there's more than enough time to make those corrections. And I think the danger of waiting on this list is a higher risk than, the time we have to make post Smart Scale corrections. So we'd oppose waiting on any of this at all.
yeah,
I concur as well that we move forward and go to TTAC in February with the confirmed list.
all right. So last call for comment. We've heard once again all over the board. Want to stay with the current reserve balance of 800 and some thousand, or do we want to flex in one or two more projects? Do we have any with the understanding that Suffolk is interested in adding the two, and Hampton's probably interested in adding their one. Is there any hard feeling in the rest of the group?
Again, Mr. Chair, I would support doing the two. Actually, I'd support even putting money on the third one because, again, it at least gets it in the program to where if we have other projects that finish up ahead of budget, that we have something to transfer money to that's in the program.
Robert, you lost me on the third one. Which one would be the third one?
I believe it's the Hampton project. Again, it would be just minimal money, but at least it gets it in the program, and it does free it up and make it eligible should Hampton have another project that finishes up with budget surplus. It could be transferred to that later.
Math my head. So if you do 300 to the two Suffolk projects and say 218, if you do $100,000 to the Hampton project, that'll still leave us about $100,000 in reserve. Question I'd come to there is $100,000 going to be something that can start